Nah, man. There was a picture, a private picture, and it flying all over the school and in other schools too. She trusted somebody. Now look what happened.
What happened? Whew. Y'all talking about Leah's new pics? Everybody can see. Them hot.
Liam, stop saying that like it's a new song. That ain't no mess.
You look like you see a ghost. What happened?
Look here, Jada. It's Leah. You see the thing them post in the WhatsApp group?
Nah, I ain't checked it yet. What thing? Was it a joke or the test?
Nah, man. There was a picture, a private picture, and it flying all over the school and in other schools too. She trusted somebody. Now look what happened.
What happened? Whew. Y'all talking about Leah's new pics? Everybody can see. Them hot.
Liam, stop saying that like it's a new song. That ain't no mess. That is Leah's life we're talking about. You send it now?
Well, I mean, Kevin sent it to me. Like, probably sent it to actually on my partners. What's what everybody doing? It's just fun entertainment.
Fun? But listen to yourself, boy. When one picture leave the phone, it gone forever. You know that, right? She can't take that back. She gonna lose her mind over this. You make she feel shame about her own body. She can't even get into certain colleges that girl. She can't even get certain jobs in on. You make her the moment of permanent for the rest of her life. And for body Allah. Take everything for a joke. Suppose I'm trying to family members. How will you feel?
I didn't even think about it that way. I mean, but this is why everybody that do when them get news, I'm not just pass it down upon her hand. I ain't need to hurt you.
Well, you're hot up. Every time you press the forward button, you're making the damage worse. Now, you think about the next time before you ruin somebody else's future.
Delete it now and tell them other boys stop the spreading. We can't take back everything, but we can prevent it from going further. It's the least you could do. You hear me?
Look, I'm gonna tell them delete it. Cause now that I think about it, they ain't good at all. Now I want out my conscience. Matter of fact, I'm gonna look for Leah till she's sorry.
Good. Let's go look for Leah, Jada.
Listen up. What you share here today stays forever. The screen record button, the screenshot, the forward button, they turn a private moment into a permanent record of your life. Digital images are never truly deleted. Once they leave your phone, you lose all control. This isn't just about embarrassment, it's about your future. Sharing explicit content can destroy opportunities for college admissions, lead to serious legal charges like cyberbullying or child pornography laws, and inflict devastating, lasting emotional damage on yourself or someone you care about. Before you click send, ask yourself, is this worth my future? Is this worth someone else's pain? Protect yourself. Protect your friends. If you're being pressured, or if you see something shared without consent, speak up. There is always someone who will listen and help.
Good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Kishante Konakati and I have the privilege of serving as your moderator for tonight's Law Week 2025 panel discussion. Tonight we explore a topic that has become central to how we live, learn, communicate, and even how we relate to one another. the ethical use of technology in society. Today, we live in a world where access to social media and content sharing platforms is instant, constant, and incredibly powerful. These platforms allow us to share our emotions, our experiences, our relationships, and even sometimes our most private moments. Technology connects us, but it also exposes us. Our one message, one photo, one video, one careless post can significantly affect someone's life beyond the screen. Tonight's discussion will focus on the ethical use of technology, especially on social media, and the personal, social, and legal implications of inappropriate sharing. Tonight's panelists are Rodwell Grant, whom is a guidance counselor, Mr. Tishan Gums, IT consultant, Mr. Theon Tross from the Attorney General Chambers, Ms. Yannick Stewart, barrister at law, and Sergeant of Police Cheryl Cunningham Coombs from the Royal Anguilla Police Force. To our panelists, welcome. To ground ourselves in the core theme of tonight, the ethical use of technology in society, what's one way that the topic resonates with you guys most? We can start with Ms. Yannick Stewart.
Good evening, everyone. I am Yannick Stewart, and I'm an attorney at law. I have been practicing here for just under 15 years. The ethical use of technology in society, I believe it is something that is very topical, and I guess you asked how it resonates with me. I believe there is a dissection, if you may, between the law and morality as it relates to the use of technology. Because when you're talking about ethics and you're talking about morality, and then you're talking about law on the other hand. So I believe that there is a significant role to be played by the law, or as it relates to the administration of justice, in seeking to somehow moderate how we use technology and potentially how to use it responsibly, because we are seeing instances where there have been abuses that have caused significant harm, and oftentimes than not, the usual sources that we go to in terms of moderating how we conduct ourselves morally or ethically, those fail. And where there's that failure, I believe that's where the law comes in. And so I believe it is very pertinent for us to be having this discussion now during Law Week, so that we can remind members of the society what the legal implications are. Certainly from my perspective, what the legal implications are of the unethical or immoral, if you may, use of technology in society. Thank you.
Mr. Tross?
Well, there's not much I can say after my learned friend, but I am Theon Tross. I am a senior crown counsel at the Attorney General's Chambers. Not practicing for as long as Mr. Stewart, only practicing for around 5 years. In terms of the topic in itself, it gives me, well, it's very interesting to me how the topic is posed, because as we look at society and how technology is changing and how it becomes an everyday part of our lives, there's an obligation on each and every one of us as to how we use it. Speaking from the position of a prosecutor, there will become a time when the laws change, and our duty in using technology will have criminal aspects to it. And I think before this happens, we have to consider what society is now, the standards that we have, and how we can create a society that allows for the use of technology that considers and reflects who we are as a people, and that it doesn't go beyond the scope and the pale.
Brilliant answer.
Good evening, everyone. In my capacity as an educator and also social work, I've been working with children and young people for the last 25 years of my life. And because the online space is an environment that captures the attention of children and young people. And because of the provisions that also exist in the conventions of the rights of the child, it allows children basic privileges and rights to communicate and access to information and the like. And so when it comes to the inappropriate sharing of material content, whether it be video, whether it be texting, whether it be images, it is great concern to me because of the thinking of child protection issues and how it moves from an online space to how it affects children and young people on a personal level and also on a more relational and societal level, and more so the implications of these actions it would have on academic performances, but more specifically, the issue of mental health issues arriving from such actions. And because we live in the Caribbean, and in our Caribbean context, most of our communities are very closely knit. And so it has far-reaching implications in the long term for how people cope, how they adjust to daily living, but more the concern with regards around children and young people would speak to the need for legislation and more so support systems that would offer those who, as the research or the literature suggests, over time they become bullied, they become depressed. Simple images lead over time to suicide ideation and all these sorts of things that plague a young person's life. And it depends on the dynamics of the situation. It would also curtail the quality of life young people would experience. And so this discussion is relevant. I'm happy to be a part of the distinguished panel this afternoon, and hoping that our community and the wider audience would be sensitized in terms of how we could effectively use the internet in a positive way, not to bring people down, but to more help people to become the better versions of themselves that they should be.
Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned earlier, I am Cheridel Cunningham Coombs, Sergeant of Police, a member of the Royal Anguilla Police Force. In terms of how this topic resonates with me in my capacity as a law enforcement officer, we see over time a number of reports of this nature. And as our world has become increasingly digital, we find, as Ms. Stewart said, in terms of morality, that society has lost its moral compass where the ethics of sharing content online is concerned. And I believe that as a society, outside of law and legal provisions, that we ought to have some level of morality where it's concerned to understand that when we partake in these activities, the impact is lasting. And it can have effect, as Pastor Grant mentioned, in terms of the social impact and the psychological impact on individuals and society by extension. So as a law enforcement officer, I find this session timely to reach the masses, and I hope that this afternoon the information that is shared would deter those persons who have been actively participating in these activities.
Good evening. My name is Tishon Gomes. I am actually a system engineer at the Department of IT and E-Government Services. I've been working in that post for about 5 years, and I have about 5 years of education in the field of information systems and digital innovation. And a lot of my insights have been shaped mainly by my colleagues, both senior and junior at the department, And why the topic resonates with me distinctly is because I'm seeing a shift now. A few years ago, we used to talk about technology and, design by security, but now there's a big movement to design by ethics. I need to consider the ethical implications when I consider any consultation with an outside vendor. I need to, when I'm designing any software, and my colleagues can attest to that, because the way in which technology is used today is very difficult to police, and as my fellow panelists would have mentioned, it's becoming increasingly difficult to proactively put in place legislation. So in a lot of ways, it's more reactive. So I'm trying to put in place, or at least build awareness to persons that, put in place or exercise to persons that it can't be an afterthought. We need to consider what are the moral implications of posting something online, especially in the case of very sensitive information such as credit card details, and even cases where you may think, this is not potentially damaging to a person, such as post of your unconsenting children. And with the technology that's put in place now, I'm assuming everyone here has seen AI-generated videos and how fast it can propagate across the internet. So it's just to build a general awareness of what to look out for, what to be mindful of. So that's why I'm here this evening, just to help the general populace build their awareness.
Awesome answers. As the world continues to evolve, social media platforms and online platforms has become a way that we connect, communicate, and share with others. Some have shared a little too much. What do we think about oversharing, and how do we control the output?
Well, in terms of oversharing, I think I'm at one end of the spectrum. I don't think, save and except a photo to let family back home know I'm alive, that I post anything on social media. When social media first came out, I remember we shared all our thoughts. I think I was in high school at the time. Now I'm in a phase where every month you see posts that you would have made when you were 15, 16, 17. Posts that don't resonate with who you are as you grow up. I think there is a balance that has to be met. There is a tool that is available in social media where you can share your views with persons and you can find community. But at the same time, there are certain thoughts that ought not to be put out on social media, not certain views that you don't need to have. I think there has to be a balance, and we need to find the proper space where we can give people the space to express themselves, but to let them know at the same time, though they have the right to express themselves, they should be wary of what's online. One of the reasons I didn't post was, I think at the age of 15, my father told me that one of his friends who worked in Washington at the time expressed that everything you post online will always be there. So it doesn't matter that you deleted it now, it doesn't matter that you've moved on. We see when we look at different celebrities now that things that they've said 20 years ago comes back to haunt them, things that they don't reflect who they are as a person, don't reflect their work. It changes how people view them. So I think when we're looking to overshare, we can't look at social media in present day. We have to look down the road and say, what is the impact of what I'm doing now? Which, of course, is extremely difficult.
What kinds of personal information would you never share, even with consent?
Well, I never share personal information. Any information whatsoever is personal for a reason. And I just believe that there are certain things that you should not have in the public space. And the difficulty is, as it relates to the question that you asked before, that is difficult to police. It's easy to criminalize conduct where somebody is doing something maliciously. So if somebody puts out a post that potentially, for example, explicit images of somebody else, you can criminalize that conduct. But what happens when I decide to put that out and it's an image of me, or it's a video, it's whatever, that is difficult to police because we are all free to do that. And again, it just goes back to the issue of morality. It goes back to ethical issues. Now, again, personal information, your banking information, because I think sometimes when we are talking about these issues, we only think about the explicit content, the things that are very unpleasant. But personal information, banking information, I think maybe all of us here are graduates. So your transcript, for example, that is not something that you would want to have out there. Your medical information, that kind of information, I think, should never be published. And sometimes we think maybe it's just one person publishing the information of another person. But I think it also there are questions arising, privacy questions. What if the state decides to publish certain information? So when you check the voters list, for example, there's a lot of information that's there, and it's public. It's within the public domain. So it may vary depending on individuals, but I don't believe that your medical history, anything having to do with your private financial situation, those kinds of things should not be published. And also from a legal perspective, when you're dealing with children who may have had situations or issues before the court, you don't want to have that information in the public domain. So we still have to be very careful as it relates to what it is that we are publishing, even with consent.
I think because we exist in a digital era, long are those days where we wrote letters and we were anticipating the postman, the post lady to bring a Christmas card. Technology has brought us together in many good ways. I love social media. I use social media a lot. And one of the things that guides my interaction with the platforms on social media, it has a lot to do with how would I feel if this information is in the hands of my enemy or a stranger that just doesn't like me for whatever reason. And so the content on my platforms are always guided by me processing a variety of questions. I cannot say that everybody goes through that phase. And one of the things that social media platforms and persons who use it need to understand, that because we live in the era where life surrounds technology and builds around technology, we are held responsible for what we share. Persons in the Caribbean now are cringing because a simple application for a US visa or a Canadian visa, you have to share your social media platform. And depending on what the consular officer finds, suggests that that could influence the outcome of your application. And so it's not just about what's right in my eyes, but also about how this is going to affect my family, my colleagues, the organizations that I represent, and more so, how is it going to shape conversations around who I am as a person, and how that is going to influence persons to think about me and my thinking about people when they respond to what they see. And as my colleagues have mentioned earlier, it's very much important that we do not share personal information at all. Just last week, I showed a clip with a very close-knitted group, friends of mine from childhood, about a dog I have, and this dog gives me trouble. And at the end of the night, the dog was talking. I'm here because Rodwell has me here. They use AI to generate the dog talking about how dissatisfied he was being my pet. And that is technology today. My face could be on an image, and my voice could be attached to an image, but I didn't give that message. And so we have to be conscious about what we say, when we say it, how we say it, and by extension too, our associations with organizations, because we could be labeled terrorist. We could be labeled as part of a coup d'etat because of liking a particular page, viewing a particular page or organization so often. And so it brings us to the point where not just the ethical concerns about harm and doing good, but for individuals who interact on the internet and these platforms to ask themselves deep questions before they actually post, share, or say something because of the implications they would have.
So, in general, we have to be very smart about what we share online. Do we believe that the public understands this same sentiment, or are we still defining the boundaries of what is responsible to share online?
I think it's evolving, and we have to appreciate that John Public, everybody is at different levels and coming from different spaces. Because what is oversharing, going back to the question about oversharing, what is oversharing for me may not necessarily be oversharing for you. And because it's an evolving space, I think the commonality in this discussion in terms about what we share and how we share it, what is bringing us together is this whole theme of the ethical use. And that is what we want to resonate with the public. This is what we want to resonate with young people, with children, with persons in relationships, with persons who have online markets, the ethical issues that surrounds the harm that would come as a result of publication. And because there is this whole evolution, because we look at technology and it's like every year there's a different aspect of it come out. The technician and consultants in IT would be better able to explain it more. But as those parameters shifts and the services improve, I think discussions need to be have on before and ongoing as to how we could better use these services to ensure that we don't create war and fight and strife and not hurt people and embarrass people. So I believe in its sense, in its state as being liquid, that the conversation needs to be there. It's like the thermometer, checking to see if we're too high, if we're too low, if we're in between. And I think that is what needs to happen as we go forward.
Also, so there's an evolution happening with the technology, but also in our morality. We are now, we like the viral culture. So what things go viral? It's not the good things. It's not the good deeds that you will see going viral. We're not all talking about the good thing that this person did yesterday. We like to see the things that we know are wrong. So it's not that we don't know. We know it's wrong, but that is what we want to see. That is what has the pull. We all want to see that video of this person maybe explicit. We want to see the video of the accident and we want to see those images. So everybody wants to see that. So we, in an age where everything goes viral, and you can see the celebrity status of certain persons who have gone viral from these videos or these images. So again, the thermometer, as you speak about that, in terms of whether we're low or middle, it's through the roof. It is through the roof because it's almost as if every day you have to do something to outmatch or outdo this other person because you have to go viral. And once you go viral, then it's the celebrity status, regardless of the content and how distasteful it may be. You may find that you are the spokesperson, I don't know, for some company somewhere, and before you know it, you're making money from it. So how are we then to tell people, you know, don't do this, don't do that, when there has been a shift in what we deem acceptable within the public space. So people frown on certain things anymore is perfectly fine, because if you go viral and you can make money, why are you going to stop the hustle? So the conversation definitely needs to change.
It's different when we post our own content ourselves, but when it leaks, there is another issue. Mr. Grant, what would you say are the social and psychological consequences when private content leaks?
I always say that in our face-to-face interactions, regardless of whatever level we are in society, we need to deal with people or handle people like we're putting on latex gloves. Because we're dealing with a life that we're molding, and if we make mistakes from a psychological perspective, we can mar that life. And it's the same in the case of the sharing and publishing of inappropriate behavior. On a personal level, people would go through a lot of psychological distress. The research suggests that there is a high level of shame, humiliation. Persons get into anxiety on a personal level, and it can lead to serious mental health issues, suicide ideation, as I referred to earlier, and also post-traumatic stress disorder. On a personal level also, there is loss of control. Once your content is shared online, you as a person, I as a person, we don't have control over it whatsoever. And the internet never forgets. The internet never forgets, meaning that that content that is shared could be copied. It could be done probably in the moment when you were a bit tipsy and you got home and said, well, yes, I just want to. And then you realize, like, you know, like earlier today I had an experience, a very good friend of mine, and I said, did you really mean to share that in this group? And she was like, did I share it in the wrong group? I was like, yes, you did. Immediately, she was able to delete. But in some cases, persons are able to screenshot and save that information. So there's loss of control on a personal level of that information that goes out. And there's a lot of safety risk at a personal level where sharing personal information is concerned, especially with inappropriate content. It can expose individuals to cyber hacking, online harassment, extortion. The literature suggests grooming by sexual predators. And this could genuinely result in people experiencing significant fear. When we talk about a personal level also with the leaking of inappropriate images, this can have an impact on future opportunities for persons which can resurface years later and probably harm their prospects of employment. Even academic institutions who are conducting background checks, and was referred to earlier with the consulates of these developed nations doing background checks. On a personal level also, their physical health problems, severe stress, anxiety, resulting from the abuse, which can manifest as physical illness and other health problems in people over time. The social implications, if we look at it, there is isolation and exclusion. Victims may often withdraw themselves from social circles or work, or even avoid public humiliation and judgment. They would just be isolated. We have also bullying and harassment, and the content is often used as a weapon for severe cyber bullying. There's victim blaming, there is legal consequences. And the sad thing about it, and I want to stress this because the research is pointing to the fact that there is this gendered impact. In about 70% of women worldwide have become targets where there are inappropriate materials being shared with them online. I draw attention quickly to a research that was conducted just last year by Valerie, 2024 out of Trinidad. And they're arguing that the non-consensual sharing, especially of sexual explicit images or videos of a person, it has emerged as a serious issue across the Caribbean and in the Commonwealth countries. And the stat says that there's a staggering 60% of persons who were a part of the research, 60% actually admitted that they were exposed to or persons shared inappropriate content with them. And it suggests also that the isolation that came out of persons, of victims who suffered as a result of the inappropriate, the unethical sharing of the images online led to about 80% of isolation. People living in isolation. So rather, instead of going out in the day, persons are going out in the night because they don't want people to point them out and say, oh, this is the person we're talking. Information get to their family circles, and so on. And the research says also that there were 70% of the participants who knew of persons who were experiencing some form of cyberbullying as a result of the sharing of information. 11% lost jobs, 46% faced public ridicule, 20% were being broken up with in terms of relationships, 25% have been expelled. This is children and young people we're talking about, suspended from school as a result of the inappropriate sharing, and 57% had an imagery redistributed or recirculated, not days, not weeks, not months after, but years after it actually happens. So this is a real conversation that we are talking about that is shaping people's lives, that is shaping the quality of life that people are living. And so it brings us back to not just the implications on a personal, social, or relational level. I think in the context of Australia and the United Kingdom, for the United Kingdom, CEOB, the Child Protection Online Agency, they have ratified and brought in laws that are harsh towards perpetrators of sharing inappropriate images, especially of children. In Australia, there was the banning of the social media platform because of the effect it was having across the nation on children's well-being and their mental health. And so as we continue this conversation, the urgency is for us to think not about just today, but the far-reaching effects this would have on people on a personal, educational, and societal level as time evolves.
As you said, these victims are going through harsh treatments from society with cyberbullying, harassment, but the law side, what is being put in place to help these victims and encourage better mental health?
One of the things I didn't share was that there was a concern out of that research that speaks to underreporting. And because a lot of this is not shared or reported to the authorities, because in some jurisdictions, the authorities are helpless because of the antiquated laws that existed. They pointed to St. Vincent de Grenadines, Trinidad, St. Lucia. Thankfully, on Anguilla, the Child Protection Act of 2019 covers a lot of safeguarding and child protection issues in terms of support. So while there are those who are reporting the harassment, reporting the breach of their privacy, we're not hearing from those who are not reporting. And they're not being offered the help and the support that they need. On Anguilla, there is the 24-hour mental health hotline that persons can call, and persons sometimes rarely use that platform. In my capacity as I call it, the lawyers would call pro bono, But Thursdays are my give back days to the community, where I meet with people and counsel people and offer psychosocial support. And I have had several instances reported to me in that capacity of persons trying to live. How do they move on? Because of what is out there. Now, our community is a small community. There are persons who would seek redress in terms of support in a private setting because of the issue of confidentiality. And they are getting by, but my concern is for that population who is not reporting, but their videos are out there, the images are out there, and it lends to us becoming responsible citizens in checking in on people. And if we suspect or know that an individual is experiencing this, especially adults, let's offer that shoulder. But there is mandatory reporting for all of us. If it happens to a child, the law says that we should not share, we should not distribute. And then there's the whole safeguarding protocol. Social development, unfortunately, which I do not represent, they manage those cases with the safeguarding unit at the Royal Anguilla Police Force, where trained personnel, police officers who are not necessarily dressed in uniform, but have had the privilege of visiting the space in which they work, which is child-friendly, which is welcoming, not just. And there is that sort of support on Anguilla because of legislation and because of policy. But in certain jurisdictions, it's not there. And that's where the legal framework, the conversations about ratifying and ensuring that persons' privacy are protected. And then the law comes into, in certain jurisdictions, you talk about lawsuits, you talk about restorative justice, and all these sorts of things that comes in conversations like these that cause victims to feel at the end of the day that I have been justified, my voice has been heard, and there's actually a stop that has come to this harassment.
I know we touched on it for a little bit, the legal implications. What are the legal distinctions and how cases like the private content leaks versus adults versus children?
Unlike other territories, the US, England, Trinidad, for example, the laws in Anguilla have not yet gone as far in criminalizing certain behavior. So in Trinidad, for example, it is in fact a criminal offense to share a nude picture of anyone, whether it be a child or an adult. Our laws have not gone as far as yet. Of course, within smaller jurisdictions, most of our laws come from the UK, from a different time, but we haven't gone so far to say this action that we can now accept is a social ill. It is in fact a crime. In terms of just the sharing of information generally, regrettably, there aren't many things that can be done. But one of the things that I have been thinking about in relation to this topic is that when information is put out into social media, it is in fact publishing of information. And one form of redress that people can look for is claiming defamation. That is when someone goes out and they have the intention to maliciously affect your reputation. Now, the unfortunate part of that is that it's quite expensive to hire an attorney and have this case go through the system. So for now, we're not in a state that we want to be, but I'm sure that within time there will be the advent of new laws that will give persons an opportunity to deal with any of their private information or malicious information being disseminated against them.
All right, just to give you an idea, as Mr. Truss has said, our laws might be a bit antiquated when it comes on to this issue. Because as you can appreciate, back in the day, there was no social media, so there was no conduct which could be criminalized because it just did not exist. But as society has evolved, unfortunately, our laws may be lagging. So the most you could find, so if somebody, I guess, publishes your images or explicit content, you have the obscene publications, which is under the criminal code. And if you are liable on conviction for an offense of that nature, where you are publishing something that may be explicit, the fine is $500 EC or 6 months in prison. Right? So can you think about publishing an obscene image, for example, of anybody, and the penalty, if you are to be charged under this section, is a fine of $500 EC or 6 months imprisonment. So it is not, there is a time, and I'm happy my learned friend is here from the Attorney General's chambers as they assist with the making of law or the creation of legislation to deal with these issues, because that's where it starts. So it doesn't start with the courts or with the lawyers. It starts with the parliamentarians, your elected representatives. There needs to be a push towards changing the legislation so that it is evolving. Mind you, it may not be at pace with the technology, but it needs to, there's a lot of catching up to do, because 5 years, $500 EC, most persons will think, I could do that, it's fine. And I am happy my friend mentioned a claim in defamation, because there is no law. So if somebody publishes an image of you that you do not like, it's explicit, it's graphic, whatever the nature is, you can't sue them and say, you know, they breached your privacy, for example. That is not known to the law. If it is done by a public official, for example, the police office, a police officer will arrest me and they find my phone and they go through my phone without any authority to do so. They may find my images and they decide to publish it. Then possibly I can ground a claim for a breach of my constitutional right to privacy. But if it's just another individual, then outside of a claim in defamation, there isn't much more that you can do, because the law just doesn't recognize that. So for example, if somebody hits your car, you know, you can go and sue. You can sue for negligence, those kinds of things. So it would be a claim in defamation because there's no breach of privacy. There's no or confidentiality or somebody publishing your personal content. It's not known, certainly to our law. So it's time, Mr. Tross and persons at the Attorney General's chambers, Mr. Producer, which camera is it? It's time to change the law. So I am asking you on behalf of the Anguillan public and as an attorney, because these are things that you see and you may have to, you know, explain to a client that there might not be a lot that you can get in terms of redress. So even if you go and report it to the police, when you hear that the penalty is 500 EC, I believe that makes the injury even greater, because you have been wronged and the law says it's not that serious. So it's time for our laws to play catch up with where we are, certainly as it relates to the technology.
Well, I just have a quick counterpoint to play off of that, because in my research, I also had the same thought process that, you know, technology is rapidly evolving and our legislation is not keeping pace. And at the heart of it, I think the way in which the law is being broken, you're trying to limit it too much to the medium. But I would argue that there are, in fact, acts and laws in place that does mitigate and are offensible to anyone who commits confidentiality breaches in the form of the Anguilla Labor Code. You are expected to do your job in good faith and uphold a certain level of confidentiality. There's also I believe the Slander and Libel Act, so you're not allowed to slander anyone. So it's not so much the platform that we need to police, but the act itself, I think, is the most appropriate way to go forward.
So you speak of the labor code, but what if my friend or my partner publishes that information? And you speak about the libel and slander and libel, that's where the defamation would come in. So there is that. But the other aspect of it, in terms of confidentiality, I have no duty to any other person. There's no legal duty or burden as it relates to confidentiality. So if I do that, then there really is nothing that you can do because I have not breached any right or law, if you may, as just like a regular person.
I acknowledge and I understand, but I don't want to further the narrative that there are no consequences. Because you may say that, legally, there's nothing holding me to uphold your information, but me as an employer, that can negatively impact you as well, because if I see you're that kind of person, that's grounds for potential dismissal as well, or I maybe not favor your application.
Understood. So I'm not saying that there isn't anything, I'm just saying that it's not sufficient.
Just to add to what Ms. Stewart said in terms of the penalties not being harsh enough, and it can be a deterrent to persons who have been affected. And we've seen cases like that where, let me give you the statistics in relation to that. We've seen cases, for example, for the last 5 years, that's from 2020 to 2025, we've had 24 reports. You might say that's not a lot, but in Anguilla it is. And we've seen in cases where majority of those cases, persons requested no further action. I recall when we would have posted something on social media in relation to the penalty for this offense, obscene publication, there were a lot of comments from persons from the public. And one of the concerns were, how can someone breach my privacy, publish images of me on social media or anywhere on the internet, and only be fined $500 ICI or 6 months in prison? And those are concerns from the public. They compare to other jurisdictions where the penalties are a bit harsher. So I believe, yes, we have some level of legal redress, but we need to do a lot more work in that area in terms of making the penalties harsher or even creating more offenses.
Yeah, I hope we didn't sound too doom and gloom and making it seem like there's no redress at all. There's a case that came to mind whilst we were speaking that emanated out of St. Kitts and Nevis quite a few years ago. Not to get into the full facts of the case, but what happened there was that the police, they arrested and detained a man, and as a part of the investigation, they took the phone. After searching the phone, they found explicit pictures of the man and his girlfriend. And within the force, they shared those videos around. Now, the impact of that, of course, is major. Everyone's seeing that intimate moment. But one of the things that happened when they turned around and sued government because they had a constitutional right to a right of family life and privacy, they received hundreds of thousands of dollars for the breach of that privacy. That is to say that the courts do, in fact, look at these offenses as serious. The separation, of course, happens now when it comes to individuals. And what my learned friend has said, there are no duties from person to person. So if something is sent to me at present in law, and it is concerning someone totally different, outside of my goodwill, I have no duty not to share it. I have no duty to you to behave in a certain way. I have no duty to handle myself in any way in relation to that picture or that information. And that is the stage that we need to get to, where we're putting an onus on people that when you're in receipt of certain information, when you have, and not just explicit information, just information generally, whether it be medical information, banking information, you can be held liable for what you do for it. I remember when I was in university and I had a flatmate, and he introduced me to what's called the dark web. On the dark web, you can buy anything. I mean, anything. I wouldn't tell you what he bought at the time, but anything's on the dark web, and that's why we have to be so careful as to what we do with information and how we disseminate it.
That also leads to the responsible use of the online platforms, as Ms. Stewart said, the individual's moral compass at the end of the day. Is blackmail often involved in the sharing of these sensitive content?
not to give too much information out, but we do have several cases of blackmail where we find that persons having shared intimate pictures and videos and things that they thought were shared for a pleasurable purpose are now being turned around and used for different reasons. And it is something that we're seeing happening more and more, but I'll leave that to Sergeant Combs to speak to.
To answer your question, yes, blackmail is often involved, but what we've seen is particular where minors are concerned. So you would find minors, they go on social media, speaking to somebody they believe to be another minor of the opposite sex. They ask for photos, they send the photos, and then this person who is impersonating another minor would say certain things to them like, if you don't do this, I'll share it. If you don't send me another, I'll share this. If you don't do that. So we've had cases like that. And if I can recall, I believe that there was one particular case where someone would have been charged for blackmail in relation to a minor, among other offenses.
Speaking of grooming, is there anything being done to address grooming and the... Mr.?
Yes, in relation to grooming, and the lawyers here can also assist. We have what we call procuration of a minor, and we've been seeing that as a common offense over the last, I believe, 5 or more years. But the difficulty is underreporting again, as well as because there are no real, well, actual provisions, you can correct me, where just as domestic violence, where we can go to court against the will of the minor as well as the appropriate adult and say, okay, this offense was committed, then we're going to take it to court regardless of if you agree or not. So we have cases where persons just come forward and say they don't want to have any further action again, even when there has already been, an investigation has already begun, because again, the length of time that those matters take to go through the judicial process, I believe some persons are deterred from that, but we do have provisions in the law for that.
And those provisions are found in the Anguilla Child Protection Act that specifies articles within, I believe, the criminal code that the lawyers would have alluded to earlier, Part 14 and Article 143 for the public's information.
But I believe as well, when you speak about grooming, a lot of this is happening because everybody has a cell phone. As soon as you could talk, or probably even before you could talk, as soon as you pop out, there's a gadget that is before you. And before you know it, you're 10 and you're on Instagram and you're on TikTok and you are communicating with persons that you don't know. As Sergeant Coombs said, a lot of adults, predators, yeah? The Epstein matter is very topical right now. He was a predator, a notorious predator, yes? And so you have those persons on the internet, on social media, you have children with phones interacting with these persons. So the grooming will start, and it starts from hello, because it's a very innocent, it's not explicit on the face of it, but it's the intent behind it. Why is an adult speaking to a child? It's not your relative. Why are you having conversations with a 10-year-old? So I believe that part in relation to grooming, again, another difficult area to police. But the question is, what about the parents? Because it goes back to the parents. Are we monitoring the usage? Are we monitoring the activity on TikTok? Do we know what our children, what are they posting? Do we know? Are you following your child on social media? Do you have control over what they post, over what they share, over to view? How do you control it? So that it's difficult from a legal perspective to have that monitored, because we get involved once an offense has been committed. If there is a view that there has been a breach, that's when we get involved. But what about the parents? Because I think it goes right back to them and ensuring that they're protecting their children and that their children are using the cell phones and the tablets and whatever electronic devices they may have, which allows them to have access to social media and other platforms, that they are using it responsibly. Now, my view is that I don't feel if you're under 16, you need to have a cell phone. Why do you need it? You don't have a job. As a matter of fact, you should be under 18. Who is putting credit on your phone? Who is paying your bills? You know? So you can't use it responsibly if you have no responsibility. How are you getting this phone? Right? So it goes right back to the parents and those moral issues and the proper foundation at its core, I think, is what is needed to try to prevent it, because there will be predators.
And we know once something is online, we can't take it back. So what are the technical or legal options to sort of take down private content if it exists?
I'm sure this is for Mr. Gomes, for sure.
In your first statement, you said once you post something, it exists forever. So I will further reiterate that point, that once something is posted, it does in fact exist forever. You can hold large organizations accountable, and you can enforce that they remove the content, but as we've been saying all night, it's very hard to police the individual. So once an individual gets a hold of that content, that's it. It's on their local device, and everyone nowadays does have a phone, and I can't enforce, or nor do I have the resources to remove information from every device on planet Earth. I will say, though, that if you are a part of a large organization, it's not that doom and gloom, because it's heavily policed and trafficked by, in the government's case, the Department of IT. So we have a number of restrictions in place that prevent you, or we can recall a message. If it's not your intention, we can delete content from our network, but once it exits our network, well, that's our control. I probably get about 1,000 phishing emails in the last quarter. So a lot of that does not reach the public eye. You probably only see about 2, but that's the measures we have in place, preventing you guys from exposing sensitive government information to malicious actors. Referring to the school as well, the Inspire project, that because the laptops are issued through DITES, we have a number of controls that we can carefully monitor. No child is allowed to download any content that we do not permit, and with accordance with the education director. So within a private network, there are some restrictions, so it's not, again, all doom and gloom, but I cannot monitor your private device. So there's a gray area there.
As technology continues to evolve, AI-generated content has become normalized to us. How vulnerable is Anguilla to deepfake videos or AI-generated intimate content?
I believe that's a question you have to pose to the general public. Like, how vulnerable are you yourselves vulnerable to AI-generated content? And I'll be the first to admit, about 2 years ago, it would be very easy to spot, but as time has progressed and there's large investments in technology, it's becoming rapidly difficult to detect what's a AI-generated video and what's official content.
Just to piggyback off of what Mr. Gum said, what we find now is, well, taking this out of the realm of criminality and child pornography and explicit content, during the time of COVID, we would have seen misinformation galore, where everyone had an opinion, medical opinion, legal opinion as to certain matters. What we're having now, even when we look at the ethical use of technology, the information we share as well, we must be concerned with what we share and how we share. There are persons who are not minded to do a second tier of research. So if I post as an attorney, it is against the law to do X, Y, Z, and that is not in fact the law. There will be persons who would say, well, all right, he's an attorney, he works at the Attorney General's chambers, he sounds believable, that is now a law. Similarly, during the COVID phase, there were persons saying, look, I've done the research, you need to pour bleach down your throat, and that information there, it goes out to the public. And there are persons, as silly as it may sound, they may take that as fact. And we have to make sure that even in this day and age where information is so readily accessible, we're cautious of the information that we share, cautious of the information that we create, and what we engage with. Because even when you have AI content, I've been fooled several occasions. There's this AI app, I think, called Sora. And every time I'm on Instagram, I see a video of somebody jumping off something. And there's a place in Antigua that's very dangerous called Devil's Bridge. And I saw a man jump off into Devil's Bridge, and he was swimming, and I was confused. Then I saw the little water mat that says Sora, and I said, oh, it's fake. But had I not been aware or not cautious as to what it is, I would then think that one of the most dangerous areas is safe for me to dive into it. Of course, I wouldn't dive into it because I can't swim, but that's a totally different conversation altogether.
As you said, it has a lot of misleading information on social media. So do we go along as the public, introduce media literacy programs to further understand as we continue to delve into this digital age?
I was just going to say that after Mr. Tross mentioned about the AI and not being able to distinguish, because you asked about the vulnerability of the society. And even before AI was that, well, rampant, for want of a better word, we find that persons were still being deceived. So you might receive a WhatsApp message from some random, I'm not being offensive to any particular country, but let's say from somebody from Nigeria saying that Samsung has this promotion and you've won this amount of money and send this information. And we've had situations where persons actually sent their personal information. And that's even before AI was this rapid increase in AI. And even now, where it's so difficult even for, I should say, literate persons to differentiate between what's AI and what's not AI, I believe that our society is even now most vulnerable. So as you mentioned about literacy, had the stakeholders, so from the police to the education department, to the financial departments, to the banks, and everybody, I believe that it takes a cohesive effort so that education, that awareness, and it's not just a one-time thing like we have the annual law week. It shouldn't just be one particular week. It should be something that's out there constant, because bad information or false information is constant, so we should be constant and consistent with the good information.
Should we begin drafting legislation or regulations on, as I said before, AI-generated content, because it's becoming progressive?
I don't think that we're at a stage yet that we can regulate AI, because we really don't know the extent of what it can in fact do. It's like when Bitcoin came around and we were trying to understand how the IPOs and these things work, and they were here for a very short space in time and then it disappeared. Well, we don't know what AI can become. So we can create laws now, and come next year, the situation is changed altogether, and the laws that we have, they just can't deal with it. So we're in a very strange place when it comes to the legal sector, because we too have to understand AI, we too have to understand how does technology impact us. I was at a conference recently, and the conversation spoke to the use of ChatGPT, for example. And there's so many persons who use ChatGPT to, whether it is to resolve questions, to summarize information. And one of the things that came out and was so interesting was when you put that information into a ChatGPT basis, you're putting your confidential client information in a cloud, and you're not entirely certain where that information goes. Now, I'm certain when the tools came about, everyone was so happy. As opposed to hiring a junior lawyer and spending all that money, you could now put it on the ChatGPT system. But then immediately a confidentiality issue arises. So we're in a position where the law has to watch and understand what AI is becoming, but I don't think anyone knows what AI is and the full extent of it.
Mr. Gums, this question is for you.
So I would like to further reiterate on his point of data confidentiality. If you are working for an organization, please do inform your IT department or your superiors that you are using AI, ChatGPT, or any other tool to make sure it is okay. Within ChatGPT, there's actually a feature, if you go into settings, data control, where you can turn off training the model. And effectively what that does is it prevents, or it opts you out of sharing your information with the company, or it should, or if they do, you can hold them accountable. But to reiterate to anyone within the organization, if you are handling financial, human resource, or health information, please report to your director or your IT department to ensure that you are not exposing multiple potential persons to data breaches.
Mr. Gums, as people become more comfortable with technology, are we seeing an increase in complacency? Like, for example, less caution when sharing information or forwarding information without thinking of the impact?
It depends on the individual, but it depends on the individual, but earlier this evening, Mr. Rodwell would have stated that before he posts, he thinks about several things. So one thing we try to encourage, if you're unsure, take 5 seconds. 5 seconds does not seem like a lot of time, but before you post anything, take 5 seconds to determine what are the implications of me posting this. So my job, especially in IT, is to create a bit of friction. Like, I'm not gonna make things too easy for you to post anything without going through a bit of effort and time to think about, should I be sharing this? Am I sharing it with the right person? So, and the banks do as well, because it comes in the form of, say, like multi-factor authentication. So that time when you take to paste your code, unlock your phone, that is the bit of user friction to make you think in earnest, should I be posting this? I had a discussion with one of my colleagues right before this panel, and he says before he posts anything on social media, like Facebook, he shares it with himself first, and he'll see how the content looks, and then he'll adjust, edit, and then release to public. And I thought that was brilliant. So that's what I would encourage most of the public to do. Just take 5 seconds to think genuinely, should I be posting this content?
Mr. Grant, I would love to go back to the gender implications which you touched on. We can see that there is a gender bias when intimate content of girls and women in regards to males and boys. Why is that? Why do you believe there is that gender bias?
Is abuse by a 71% ratio, right? So we live in a culture that has hypersexualized women. And you have to be careful because people are making money. It's a business. And the innocent images that teenagers would use to put, and adults would post, whether it be in a simple WhatsApp chat or online, it goes on the dark web. And in this research that I referred to earlier, that occurred in last year, the paper was published with the University of the West Indies. In the Trinidadian context, it spoke to large sums of money being paid for images on the dark web. So even though I might have sought redress or I think it's over, that image exists in another part of the world and people are gaining income off of it. And I think we need to teach our boys, teach our men and women folk about the sanctity of people's bodies. And not look at women as objects of sex, because that is where the industry fuels. And that is where the money is coming from. And we talk about the pornography sites and all these sorts of things. And that is why women are at this disadvantage. Adam, he looked at Eve and he said, whoa, man. So from creation, women have always been attractive and appealing. In certain places you go, there's a woman in a bikini and a bottle of water. There's a woman in a bikini purchasing food. Most of our tourism products, when you look at it, it's a woman who is half naked. And we need to teach this society to see women differently. And women, by and large, are vulnerable, classified as a vulnerable group under the different charters that we have around. And I think it has a lot also to do with empowerment and esteem issues on a personal level rather than a relational level. Because if we're depending on somebody else to tell me that I'm beautiful looking naked, something is wrong with us. And persons have to come, because this is one of the fundamental pillars that would result in persons sharing nude images and inappropriate images and content of themselves because they want to be liked. Attorney Yannick earlier spoke about people becoming celebrities overnight at the foolishness that they post the likes. And these platforms actually pay people for likes. And so we have to, in our train of thought, not look at women as being hypersexualized. I have daughters, and I say to my daughters, under no circumstance should you ask anybody, or somebody should ask you to take out a picture on the beach. You're in your swimsuit. It's an innocent gesture. I remember while working in the UK, and it's a big thing in Scotland and in the UK on a whole, where children's agency is advocated for. And one of my friends went out with her family, and some distant cousin who they didn't see in some time came and say, "Can I have a picture with you?" And the child was like, "No." And persons from our Caribbean backgrounds like, "But why an adult asking a child for a picture? If I say as an uncle or you as an aunt come for a picture, you better come." That's the way of our thinking. But you have to respect the child's decision not to take out a picture with you. Because I tell you what, in my experience of church, many years ago, my pastor traveled to Canada on a missionary trip. And in a particular church, he found a special corner that had pictures of children and young people from his church. And there was a heading over those pictures, seeking medical attention. So that organization was collecting money from people on behalf of children who innocently stood up just to smile in front of a camera. And we were properly clad. Think about what happens when you're not properly clad. And it's a conversation that needs to happen in church too. Because it's not just for the school, it's not just for the boys' brigade or whatever. We have children and young people in church. We have human beings in church. And we have to start teaching and inculcating the conversation of morality, which brings us back to what is right, what is just, who we are harming, who are we protecting, why are we doing what we're doing. And so to clearly answer your question, because women are vulnerable and are at this 7 to 1% in the statistics, I think education along the lines of self-esteem and empowering our women to see themselves as beautiful and our girls as strong. You don't have to get a like to feel like you're loved. You are beautiful just as you are. And let women take responsibility of their bodies, saying, I'm not doing this, and you cannot force me to do so.
Wonderful answer. That was about to segue into my next question, which what is the pressure to perform on these social media platforms have on the identities, the self-esteem and self-worth of our young people and even our adults?
Social media is a false reality. And the longer an individual takes to accept that, is the more trouble they would face. One of the things I would like to change about me is my facial hair. It looks horrible when the razor bumps come out. Fortunately for technology, there are filters, which cause me to look maybe like I just had a shave. And people filter a lot of things. And because of that, not everything is real on Facebook. And persons have to understand that, yes, the pressure out there to have followers and likes and become popular is real, but persons should not succumb to that pressure. Attorney Truss earlier spoke about the thought processes that he would go through in terms of a post. And I was reading a post recently, because I have friends who don't post anything for years. And we were having a conversation and they were like, we're still here. We're just trying to understand the madness. But we are here. Nothing about us have changed. And their lives have less drama. Less drama. And for persons who are seeking attention, because you have persons who have attention-seeking syndrome, and they would put the craziest of things out there because they feel hype, they get energy, they get more popular. I'm telling you, people talking about foolishness and having like 500,000 likes. And you're trying to educate the society on something that is beneficial for health, for school, for business, and people are not following you. It's because persons have become so incensed. And it brings us to the point in valuing the face-to-face relationships, the camaraderie, which is real and authentic. I'm not suggesting that meeting folks online is not authentic. You can build networks and whatever. And for the last 2 months or so in the schools, with the help of the school safety officer, we've been talking a lot about the online platforms, and we've been educating children and young people across the island about things that they should not post. You know, their location, where they live, their phone numbers. I have a Facebook page, but it doesn't have my real name. So you have to be very, not cocky, but thorough and thoughtful as to how you go about generating these accounts and wanting to know, why is it that I'm actually having this account? There are persons who are just idle in our society, and unfortunately the masses support and applaud such things. And it's those acts of idleness that sometimes create chaos. I remember in the Republic of Guyana just recently, a famous social media commentator said, we're going to have a big fight on the Square of the Revolution, which is Coffee Square. And in less than 30 minutes, about 600 people turned up on the Square of the Revolution to see a fight. Unfortunately, many were wounded. Persons were hurt. Why would I would ask myself that question, but it brings us back. People need to be thinking about their actions. Am I going to put myself in danger? Am I going to put somebody else in danger participating in such activities or posting such stuff? And it brings us back to valuing ourselves. Because you don't want to exist in a space. It's going to be frustrating. I know of people who sit down on their Facebook page waiting for somebody to just like or share a status. It's sad. It tells us that we're looking for help. We're looking for attention. And it brings us back to self-worth, to value, and this whole conversation about ethics, how we treat people, and why is it that I am doing what I am doing on social media.
You briefly touched on the programs for young people for responsible sharing. How has it been received?
Well, I believe when we start early that education is very impactful, and the report is being compiled as so the success particularly of these the aspects of these programs, because one of the things we take for granted is the cyber harassing and the hacking that actually takes place on these platforms for children. And more children, even in playing Roblox and all these sorts of games, are exposed to actors outside of their culture, outside of their locations. They're forming relationship and innocently sharing pertinent information about themselves and their families. And so children and young people are thinking that, okay, if a stranger comes at my door, I'm not going to open it. So if a stranger reaches out to me online, I should not. And that's worrying, because Facebook, I believe, has a policy that you should be of a specific age to have an account. But yet still we're having minors creating accounts. How do we manage that? How do we deal with that? And so the children are being empowered to make right decisions, not just on the social media platform or TikTok or IG or whatever they have, but even in the sharing of responsible messages that would seek to reduce the incidence of bullying and harassment that occurs within the classroom setting, and by and large the community in which we thrive. So I can say that it has been very, very impactful thus far. And based on conversations this morning with the health and safety officer, he's looking forward to work with the other schools across the island.
We've had a powerful discussion so far. So before we move into closing thoughts, we have a question from the audience that any of the panelists can answer. Can we regulate the users in terms of how they treat others with social media platforms?
I presume it may be possible, but what first comes to my mind is the platform itself. The platform will have to regulate how things are being used, and regrettably, none of the platforms are registered in Anguilla, so that these platforms they're not under the jurisdiction of this court. So we can say, well, Facebook is not doing what we have said to do in Anguilla, and we don't have the money to take on Facebook in the American courts. So it is a very difficult thing. But I do believe there is some space that we can regulate persons locally, so that when they're using these platforms, that notwithstanding the internal policies of those companies, what they do within the jurisdiction can be regulated in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you for that thoughtful question from the audience member. As we prepare to close, I'd like each panelist to share a final message with the public. What one piece of advice would you give to Anguillians to stay safe, responsible, and ethical online? Let's start with Mr. Gums.
I like how my seniors have thrown me under the bus quite eloquently. Well, what guides my actions, I would say, because I'm heavily rooted in tech, is probably, there's a framework known as ESG, Environmental Social Governance. So it makes me pause and think, what are the social implications of what I'm doing? what are the responsibilities I have to uphold, and to reiterate the fact to myself that with freedom of expression comes responsibility and accountability.
Closing, just to let the general public know that when we choose to post certain inappropriate content on the internet, they are far and spoke of the social, the personal and psychological implications that it have, and not just on the individual, but from a societal perspective. And there are also legal implications. Even though they are not that stringent, there are still legal implications. So the advice that I would give to persons that we must use the technology responsibly. For those persons that are victim, avoid oversharing, because oversharing can lead to cyberbullying. Your personal information is out there, and even though you might take it down, we have machines like Wayback Machines that you can go into archives and get information from persons, because persons on the dark web use those search engines to bring back information that has been, well, maybe out of your search engines for years, but they are in Wayback Machines. So use the internet or technology responsibly. Don't share personal information. Don't share your passwords. Don't share your PIN. If possible, not even your real name. Try and avoid oversharing. And for those persons who love to share inappropriate content of other persons, understand that it's another person you're impacting. It's a life that you're impacting. Persons can commit suicide because you chose to be irresponsible. And then a society can be impacted, other persons, because of what you chose to do irresponsibly. That can break down the level of trust that people have in society. So be responsible with your sharing, and be responsible and ethical and moral, not sharing information, personal information of persons on the internet.
I think for me and my closing thought, because my life surrounds children and young people, I would say to children and young people, and even parents who are listening to us and caregivers listening to us tonight, is to encourage our vulnerable population. Do not ever take naked photos, nude photos or videos of yourself, or ask anybody to do such. It has far-reaching implications. One of the sobering thoughts that I had going through the research and stuff for this presentation is that there was a high percentage of dissatisfaction with responses from victims who would have chose to go through the courts or whatever. 63% were dissatisfied with police response and legislation that is out there. It tells us that we have a long way to go. And because we now realize that it's just a $500, are we selling our bodies just for $500? Think about it. Somebody to violate me for $500 easy? Is that what you want? And it brings us back. I keep saying to children every day, and my children, before you speak, think. You don't think with your mouth. You think with your mind and your heart. Think about the consequences this action would have on you, not just now, but later. Let's say you're running to be prime minister or premier in our context, or maybe a position of governor arise 15 years, 20, 30 years down the line, and that picture surfaces. It's going to damage you. It's going to demoralize you. It's going to affect your support base and the people who have confidence in you. Let's ask ourselves the question, is it right? Is it just? Even if it might be right in my sight, is it the appropriate course of action that I should take? And I think because human beings, I believe, are losing their sense of reasoning, we have to come back to the table where we reason. Sometimes we say people who talk to themselves are insane. They're not necessarily so. And they may not necessarily have mental health challenges. They're just checking to see that they're human beings. They're checking that thermometer. And I think that we have to come back to that point in our lives where we have to ask ourselves questions, ask each other questions, and those questions have to be grounded in morality.
My short piece of advice would simply be, consider how that piece of information, that picture, how would it look if you're standing in court and you're being questioned on it? And before your family, your friends, and the public, they're seeing your thoughts, they're seeing your pictures, and they're seeing your content. If you think about it, if you've ever been to court and you understand how it is to be in the witness box, you'd understand that it is not something that you'd want to be. Well, especially if Ms. Stewart is asking you questions. You don't want to be on the face of it. But I think when you consider that and the implications, you'd be guided as to what to do and what to post online.
Technology is with us. There's no escaping it. There's no escaping AI and all the chat GPTs. We have to make peace with it. But we can use it to enhance creativity. We can use it to expand community. But I believe we should always remember that it's still cool in my mind to be modest and to operate from a moral compass where we know what is right and therefore we should be guided by that. And so don't create the content to begin with, but more importantly, stop the share. If somebody sends something to you that may be explicit, is personal information, whatever it is, you know, you wouldn't want that. If that was your information, you don't want it in the public domain, delete it. Stop the share. Do not send it to anybody else. And I believe if we all decided to do that, to stop the share, then it goes nowhere. So stop the share. Thank you.
Thank you to our distinguished panelists for this evening's discussion. The discussion was very thoughtful and necessary, and we touched a lot on we gained better insight and understanding of the personal, technical, legal implications of inappropriate sharing of sensitive content. We would like to thank the Anguilla Bar Association for being able to have this needed conversation, our invited guests and audience members online and in present here. Thank you. Tonight's discussion has been very meaningful, and as we continue through Law Week 2025, we hope this conversation encourages responsible digital behavior, compassionate community engagement, and thoughtful use of social media. Thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful evening and safe travel home.
Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Give it to me, that workout. You the workout, girl.
Busy phone? What? So this is what he got on his phone, eh? After all that, you're the only one for me talk? Look, Rini, that's all.
Girl, put it down.
No, you see how she posing up like she's God's gift to man. You know what? I should send these low. Let everybody see who she really be.
Don't even think like that. Them is
Keeping them like them as trophies. You know what? I should
shit make the two of them look stupid. Solve them right.
Listen, that ain't just petty. That's illegal. You know you could get charged for sharing stuff like that. And not a cool case.
But I hate how he still has her pictures. It makes me feel like I'm second place.
You're not second place. But right now, you gotta choose what kind of woman you are. Hot or hateful?
Fine, but he got some explaining to do.
Go get some ice cream before you change. People think that sending out someone's private pictures is getting back or teaching them a lesson. But once you press send, you can be sent to court, fined, or even locked up. It's an invasion of privacy, defamation, emotional abuse, all in one. And the law? Don't play with that. What's worse is the damage to somebody's reputation, their job, their peace of mind, all shattered because of one act of spite. So yeah, maybe walking away doesn't feel like justice, but it's freedom. Freedom from the guilt, freedom from the mess, freedom from the courtroom, because the smartest revenge is not becoming the villain yourself.
Yo, dog, the girl you got for me. I love it. Yo, I'm gonna send out the viewers.
In a landmark case today, 17-year-old Mark Jensen was found guilty of distributing intimate images and private information without consent, a felony. The ruling sends a clear message about the severe consequences of online exploitation.